An elderly woman knocked on my door while my husband was gone, knew everything about him, and left behind money that made him turn pale. Welcome to Betty's Magical Stories. Real secrets, unbelievable twists, and stories that will haunt your mind. My husband had been gone less than 60 seconds. That's what still haunts me. He stepped outside to take a call, the door clicking shut behind him, telling me he'd be right back. The house was quiet in that ordinary, forgettable way. No music, no TV, just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own thoughts. Then came the knock. It wasn't impatient or loud. It was slow, careful, like someone who had waited years for this moment and was afraid to ruin it. I hesitated before opening the door, not knowing why my chest suddenly felt tight. An elderly woman stood there. She was small, hunched slightly forward, clutching a faded leather handbag like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, her coat buttoned all the way up despite the mild weather. But it was her eyes that stopped me, sharp, heavy, and painfully familiar, even though I knew I had never seen her before. She said my name. Not a question, a statement. I felt the air leave my lungs. I asked who she was. She ignored the question and asked if my husband was home. When I told her he had stepped out for a minute, her face tightened, as if fate had confirmed something she already knew. Her hands began to shake. She opened her bag and pulled out an envelope, thick, heavy, unmistakable. Cash, a lot of it. She tried to press it into my hands, urgently, like she was running out of time. I refused. I stepped back. My heart was racing now. I asked her what she wanted. She said she didn't have much time to explain. Her voice was calm, but underneath it was panic. The money, she said, was never meant for me, but now it had to be given before it was too late. I asked, too late for what? She looked past me, into my home, as if the walls themselves held answers. Then she started talking. She told me that decades ago, she had been part of my husband's life. Not briefly, not accidentally. She knew his family. She knew their secrets. She knew the truth that had been buried and never spoken aloud again. She said my husband grew up believing certain things about his past, things that were easier to live with than the truth. Adults had made choices, convinced they were protecting him. Instead, they created silence. And silence, she said, can shape a child forever. My stomach dropped. I asked her what the secret was. She shook her head immediately. Some truths, she said, don't belong to witnesses. They belong only to the ones who survived them. But she needed me to understand that my husband had lived his entire life carrying a weight he never asked for. The money was not an apology. It was not forgiveness. It was regret, saved slowly, painfully over years. A desperate attempt to leave something behind that said, I'm sorry, even if the words were never spoken. She reached for my hand. Her grip was firm, almost pleading. She told me my husband had become a good man despite everything. That kindness had not come easily. It had been earned through confusion, loss, and unanswered questions. Then she made me promise something. She asked me not to confront him in anger, not to demand answers he might not be ready to give. She said if he ever spoke about the past, it had to be on his terms, because some wounds don't bleed, they stay quiet. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. My husband was coming back. The woman's eyes widened in fear. Without another word, she placed the envelope on the small table by the door, smoothing it as if it mattered how it looked. I asked her to wait, begged her to at least tell me her name. She smiled, a sad, tired smile, and said it didn't matter anymore. By the time my husband opened the door, she was already halfway down the path. He asked who had been there. I told him an elderly woman had stopped by. Then his eyes fell on the envelope. Everything changed. His face drained of color. He didn't ask what it was. He didn't touch it. He just stared, frozen, like someone who had just seen a past he hoped would never return. He sat down slowly and whispered that he needed time. That night, the truth came out in pieces. Childhood memories he had buried, a woman who vanished without explanation, questions that were never answered because no one wanted to ask them. The envelope wasn't money to him, it was confirmation. We never saw the elderly woman again, but her knock still echoes in my mind, because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it waits patiently until the exact moment you think your life is settled, then it shows up at your door, holding everything you never knew you were missing. Don't let the story end here. Hit subscribe and unlock your next magical mystery.